and it's good to be here with you. I would like to share the intention that went through my head right before the call. So
Mhm.
I'm aware that there is a fact that we are two close friends that haven't seen each other in 3 years. It's very easy for me to get swept up in that energy and like let it take me. And I want that to have its space so that we actually get to reconnect and at the same time remain aware that I also want the conversation to be of value to anyone who is listening to it, and I don't just get lost in that. Um, the other thing I had was that in the last podcast that I did, I noticed that I can easily dominate a conversation and not always give enough space for it to like for the other person to like come out. And you're welcome if that ever happens, because I'm trying not to just pinpoint it and say, hey, I'd like to share some more about this. Like, give me the room.
Sure.
Is there anything that you would like to add to that intention?
Hmm. Yeah. Before this call, I also felt like, oh gosh, I actually really wanna just connect with Pep and be super vulnerable, and in a way, sort of almost had my priority before
Mm-hmm.
the podcast. So yeah, I'd love to see how we're gonna intermingle things,
Yeah.
and yeah, definitely I also feel called to set this intention to make this conversation be of service to the collective in some way.
Yeah. Yeah, so my main reason I want to talk to you is because you've been on quite a handful of adventures since well, I think we were spending like almost every day together. And then it's like you went off on a boat and do your thing. There's a lot that I'm particularly interested about. Um, but first, I'd love to hear just like your your story, how you what happened after we went separate ways in Big Lions, and what called you, and
Yeah, um, I think we went ways that was already 2017, 16.
wow, yeah, that's 5 years.
So that's 5 years. And yeah, I was looking back lately at my journey and just realized like I've been in personal development and spiritual advancement, I guess, for 10 years. And I realized that the last 5 years have been really this kind of high-speed transformation train. So I guess you said a boat. I guess it's been really a transformation train I'm on, and like a high-speed one. Um, I think at the time we started spending less time together. Um, that was really the time I started getting into psychedelics and their healing potential also. And I started exploring ayahuasca, which I believe you had a little bit less connection with at the time.
Yeah, I felt I'm into that, and definitely into psychedelics in general. But the feeling that I had with ayahuasca was I should do it when it calls me, not when the people invite me. It's like when I feel the calling to do it. It's something I specifically am interested in because I remember indeed around that time you did it for the first two times and shared your experience. But I think by now you can add a lot more times to that, and it's also something that in the last 5 years has increased in popularity. And I'd love to hear what that has done to you as a person in your connecting to other people, but also any of the pitfalls that you've experienced, or yeah, by now you've done it a lot, and it has done a lot for you. So I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, um, I'll go ahead and answer the second part of your question first. Um, Really, at the time, the first time I did ayahuasca, it was this like wondrous, blissful experience, and I was reading a lot of Hawkins books about the stages of enlightenment, and like having that kind of preloaded in my brain was really a good space to go drink ayahuasca with. Um, and I had a sort of very clear distillation of that journey for myself, where I was clear like, oh, these are the things I need to work on in this life. Like I need to start reclaiming my space in my family system and really like let go of the roles I used to play, like the invisible child or the scapegoat, and really be like my true self in my family system and do the work that is needed for that to happen. Secondly, I saw I had not really been in my body yet until, I did this ayahuasca journey.
Mm-hmm.
So I realized, I think at age, I was 26 then, that I had been dissociated and disconnected a lot from my body. So that was kind of like the start of the exploration journey I've been on now for 5 years, on embodiment and like really incarnating my soul, because I could see that my soul was kind of dangling above my body for a lot of the time, and somehow ayahuasca made that very clear to me.
In a visible, like in a visual way, or how did that present itself?
Well, yeah, it's I had this reading from this Tim Biotis. His name is a spiritual sort of channel in Belgium, and he told me like you were really quite floating above your body. And at the time, I was sort of exploring with it and not so sure if it could be true or not. Like it sounded a little bit crazy. Um, but then with ayahuasca it was really confirmed to me, like because the I saw the spirit sort of scanning my body through and seeing and just seeing how the spirit was only able to go all the way up until
Hmm.
here, and then as soon as it got to my gut or not into my lingam or my lower parts, was just unable to pass through, because that's where it started clearing out emotional blockages and trauma. And so that, was also part of how I got insight of healing my gut, because I used to have a lot of like gut problems. And then I realized, oh, the gut is just also, it's not only processing food physically but also emotional food. So it's like all this unprocessed emotional food in my gut was having a chance to be processed during ayahuasca. And then also like the years after, because I realized, oh, like I need to do body work, get into this body work to like get into my gut and my body's wisdom. So yeah.
I love how um, psychedelics can send you these messages like a super simplistic and clear way, which to me looks very similar to like religious imagery sometimes. And it's really weird because they can be like religions you don't subscribe to, but you get it. Like oh yeah, and you know what has to happen. And the embodiment, I mean, I think that's a whole separate call that I'd love to explore with you because it's huge. But I'm particularly interested about the family thing. Also, how that message came to you through the use of ayahuasca, and what happened there. Like, what did you do with it? I'm mostly asking because that's a part of my own connections with other people where I have a lot of exploring to do and still a lot of resistance, and I do it in small steps. I find it way easier to heal relationships with friends that are damaged than I find it easy to deepen like family relationships, which either are not damaged or I'm not even ready to acknowledge that there is some damage done and some is done by me or some has to be forgiven, you know? Like it seems to be way more like a bigger or a more scary topic for me, and I'd love to hear about how that went for you.
Yeah, yeah. In a way, for me, the family type stuff always seemed like the big boss, like the end boss of the healing game or whatever. um, and actually, I was finishing my sum up of the three things ayahuasca gave me, and the third thing is she showed me my inner child, and like during that first ceremony, I was like just like nerdying, like making these singing sounds
Humming.
as an inner child during the ceremony. I was like, oh, so I have this joyful inner child inside of me that I never get to embody. And that kind of made me realize, like, and I, in a way, in the constellation of my family, I'm not really allowed to embody that. Because all
You
that
mean
light
like
of
the
that
way you guys interact? If you were all in a room together, you feel like hindered
yeah,
there?
it's like the story I have is that this joyful energy, it's quite a high vibration, and when you bring that on, it just kind of triggers parts in people that that they don't allow into themselves, so they start offering resistance. And what I found out throughout the years is that my father wasn't really allowed to have joy in his family. So when I go into joy in my family, it's sort of like an unconscious thing, like I'm not allowed, so you're not allowed, in a way.
Like
And
a tiny generational uh, trauma, or I don't know if trauma is a word. It could be like a burden that is passed on to the next one. And it's like someone has to be the one to put the burden down, but it's still a burden, so it's not easy to first lift it up. Or
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's easy. It's interesting that you say burden because I'm lately a lot into internal family systems. I don't know if you heard of it.
nothing.
And
I know
they
nothing.
really talk about unburdening the exiles. And like, so internal family system, it's this system of healing or therapy that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't talk, like, you have external family systems, I guess, the old school style of doing family system constellations, and then you have the internal family, which is basically you're made up of parts. There's a whole inner family, like a
Right.
whole inner zoo inside of you, and protectors and firefighters, and you have exiles, and the exiles are really the hurt parts that at one point couldn't really express themselves just the way they are.
Mm-hmm.
So they're burdened with something that they would have liked to expressed or released.
Yeah.
And yeah,
So
so it's
these are
important if
kind
you
of
can unburden them. They're like freer to be you in your everyday life as well.
these are parts of your psyche.
Yeah, yeah.
And when you say internal family, is it almost like a mimicking of your real family where you have the concept you have of your mother, the concept you have of your father, or is it just like a bunch of personalities that don't necessarily exist as people, but that are parts of you and parts of how you've seen them? Like how do
Yeah,
I imagine
I
that?
of course, to some degree, you take over the sort of energy and patterning of your parents, but in this internal family system, it's really like I have a 6-year-old Wout in here somewhere that is still sad because at one point he was put in the corner because he had a so-called bad behavior, and so this part of me is now not allowed in my system because it's labeled as a bad bad part in a way.
That's an
So
exile.
yeah,
Like
that
like
would be an exile.
you
Yeah.
could see it as like you were at this in this particular place in time, and then you just exiled that version of you and you went on as if that never happened because you weren't ready to deal with that at the time. Or
Yeah, so in a way, by the parent figure at that time, I believe this was a bad part of me because I, for that behavior, had to go and stand in the corner, and so I had put that label on it, and so it's a whole process of first, because there's also protectors. They're protecting, for example, you or any outside person to really get to the exile, even myself. So first I have to learn to work with the protectors, and then when they are feeling okay, this person or being is safe, then it's possibility to go and see at the exile and help him unburden and maybe unlabel that part that I would have called bad, and make him see, hey, it's okay, you're allowed to be a little bit of a rebel sometimes, and in that way integrate that energy again and have that energy find a place in my system and know that it's allowed to express and be there.
And in this work that you do, you basically then get into it, try to engage in a dialogue with these different parts and
Yeah,
moderate that.
yeah. It's really
Can
like befriending and offering space and compassion, and so they open up and just feel free to kind of unburden whatever burdens or loads they have.
I love it. And this is not just inner child, right? It's basically votes from any part of their
Yeah,
life, and
yes. As I was saying, I have a 6-year-old, I have also a 30-year-old, and I have uh yeah, there's all these, it can be anything really. It can be anything. It can be my hero part, it can be my victim part, it can be my king part, my warrior. So it's like
nice.
all these parts, but which ones are on the forefront and which ones are having the most effect on your current system and playing key parts in sort of allowing or sabotaging
Yeah.
you or enabling, I'd say.
Cool. And can you follow like you do that with a facilitator, or did you follow like a training about that, and you do it by yourself? How
Yeah,
exactly?
I'm lately really getting into it because I see the potential of it. It's really a sort of modern soul retrieval, you could say. That would be from the shamanistic tradition. Um, and I've been doing it with this guy I met online in this men's work online platform. And he's a sort of shaman, like he traveled to the jungle and he combines the work he does with IFS. And so we did some online sessions. He's in America. So I put on my laptop here and we put on a Zoom, and I would um, ingest mushrooms like psilocybin because it often helps with letting the protectors become a bit looser so you can more easily get to the exiles and do the deep trauma work, especially if
Mhm.
you have like baby parts. They need so much space and safety. It's very hard to get to on a sort of like non-altered consciousness. I have a lot of very early parts that feel unsafe, and
Yeah.
that's part of this, my soul incarnating. It's all these very early parts that couldn't get into the body. So I've been working this very deep work with this American brother of mine, combining mushrooms with IFS, which is and somatic work, which is, I think, nowadays is the killer combo of therapy or healing work.
Yeah, definitely. I would say without any body based component, like you'll never get as deep with with talking therapy. Um, well, there's a lot that I want to ask more about, but I also it reminded me that I had an experience recently. I never heard of internal family system, so I'm definitely gonna check that out. Um, when I was well, first of all, like as a teenager into my early 20s, you probably know that I was drinking a lot every day and was having a lot of fun, and and in a way, like at some point, I discovered that I did that to to protect myself. So it could have been a protector in your system from finding out that I was actually extremely anxious and also just unhappy. So then when I discovered that, one of the main catalysts for healing that anxiety and depression was to quit drinking. Um, because then my protection or escape mechanism wasn't there, so I could confront the things that I was afraid of. Yeah, because of that, I strictly didn't drink for I think 7 years, maybe six. I tend to just guess numbers, just like when I thought it was 3 years that we hadn't seen each other was five. Um, and at some point, I got this feeling like I no longer ever crave the feeling of being drunk, but sometimes I am attracted to a high quality drink specifically. So started like more. Um, my girlfriend called it Epicurean, like just having a glass of rum, just enjoying the flavor, and then that's it, and not getting drunk. Also because strangely my tolerance remained, so I generally don't get drunk. The point of getting drunk is way past the point of feeling unhealthy from drinking. So because of that, it just doesn't happen because I noticed that without having to discipline myself, I just stop when my body has enough. I also don't do it that frequently. And a month ago, well, it actually happened twice this year that I did get drunk at a wedding. And I realized, like, well, first of all, I realized that I had been a little bit anxious about getting drunk. Like, well, what if I ever do that? Will it just propel me back to being a depressed person with antisocial behavior because of my drinking and all of that? Like, I had labeled that whole part of my personality, the drunk version of me, as bad, and
Mm-hmm.
locked it up, like exiled it basically.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, in these terminologies, and then now it came out, like, and after the first time I was like, huh, that was fun, and it only led to more good things. Like, I created more fun for myself and others that first time, so that was interesting. um, I did not plan to do that again, just kind of happened 2 months later. And again, I was like, I had fun. I did not do anybody harm. Like, my intentions remained pure. And afterwards, I also did not feel like, yeah, let's do that again today. So I was able to, like, take it out of exile without knowing this, and, like, integrate it and say, well, this part of me occasionally can, do some good. It's not the part running my life. It just exists. And that felt really good. Like, to see, oh, why did I do that to myself? Like, take a part of me and just say, you're bad. We're never letting you out again. Even though it made me happy not to drink, but I didn't realize that it was also doing some harm somewhere in my psyche.
It's interesting. The one of the main books of the founder of this model is called No Bad Parts.
Nice. Yeah, because that's something, and I do sometimes engage in a dialogue with a part of me, but rarely because I haven't read any books about this or systematized it. But I always try to ask myself, like, so I assume that my soul and my mind are functional, and if there's something dysfunctioning, it's like, no, it's functioning correctly, but I don't understand yet why. So I try to figure out, like, well, what is it? What is the value that you myself, like, are offering me by behaving like this?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's very interesting the things that come out. But back to family work. Does it also then involve, um, yeah, going to family members and stepping into tension with them?
Yeah, I'll
And
share a
yeah.
bit about this journey. Because I guess at the beginning when I had like my spiritual awakening and like seeing all the possibilities of what might be possible in my relationships, also in my family relationships, I had this very rose-glassed view, like one day I'm gonna do healing work together with my father or whatever.
Mm,
Um, and what I really had to learn is to find the right, my right position and my right way of being towards family members. Because if I would want to try to help or heal them too much, either way, it would bring up resistance. So it's been a journey really more of accepting them who they are and actually
mm,
like accepting me who I am. So
yeah.
like it like lately, really the last year and a half of this journey, I've been so aware that the deepest work we can eventually do is just self-acceptance and self-love. And
Mm.
that's really what a lot of it all boils down to. And especially with all these parts, can we accept that we are all of that? Can we love all of that? Yeah.
And am I reading correctly between the lines that that also means if you don't accept yourself, that there's a possibility of burdening your parents with the blame for your existence as you are. Like, oh,
Yeah, so
I
like
don't like myself, and you made me. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, for me it's like I don't feel good enough about me,
Mm-hmm.
so you're also not good enough, and you need to change all of this to be on my level or something.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So as I started like just allowing, like every time I was together with my father and just not trying, and then just stopped looking at him through a lens of he's not good enough, he didn't heal his
Mm.
traumas, and just allowed him to be him, and just allowed there to be this space between us without me looking like, oh, he's not good enough or he's too materialistic, and just allowed that space. The more I could see there was space for us to connect from who we are already.
Yeah,
And
in
and
that
that's when
moment.
I started like doing these little hobbies together with him. Like we um he helped me create this like rapé pipe. It's like a tobacco pipe
Yeah,
for shamanic usage.
cool.
And we've gone on walks together, and they're not as deep as the conversations I would have with you, or yeah, but there is a connection that wasn't there before. So I guess it's been also like lessening my expectations and just seeing what is really possible in this connection, and then just allowing
Mm.
space for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I
Mm.
notice when I hear that and I reflect on how is my relationship like with my mom or brother and sister, and actually like there's a lot of mutual interests, and there's a lot of like we do have a connection, that's very clear. But so one thing, either from my side or with our entire family, is that we just don't, within the family, speak a lot or initiate things towards each other. And then sometimes I think like, oh, I want to change that. And then I think, well, okay, what is it, the other people? Is it me? Should I be the first to change it? And then now that I hear you, I think like, why do I even see it as a problem? You know, why not start and just say, oh, this is the way we relate to each other, and that's nice, and then explore from there.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I was doing this kind of, I know you're also into this circling, this
yeah,
relational meditation practice. um, and that for me really felt at the time like the key for really bringing my newfound spirituality and sense of being into my family system. um, and and I was speaking with the founder about it, like how am I gonna apply it, and really what I learned in that is, either way, the deepest I could do is just bring my full self, um, in a way that they're able to receive it. Like, yeah, share as much as I can in a way that also they're able to digest it.
right.
So yeah.
Yeah,
And I noticed, actually, in the beginning there was a lot of sort of deconditioning happening in for them and in our relating, because I shared a lot about like, I'm feeling these emotions with you, and I'm feeling that and this. And in the beginning, they were like, "What happened to Wout? He's so weird." And now, in a way, I noticed like my father is just sort of also came into this acceptance, like, "Oh yeah, this is Wout." So
and
yeah.
was it easy to share those things without like accidentally just being like, you know, dropping things on them that they had to deal with, like just to get it off your chest?
Yeah, I think that's been sort of a phase of calibration to
Right.
learn what exactly I could get off my chest and what not. Um, yeah, and as I said, as I learned to kind of calibrate, also the bandwidth got bigger of what I could share in a
Because
way.
you felt more competent at knowing that, like, oh, I can deliver this in a way that like is
Yeah, and the connection grew, and
acceptable
so
for
there
you.
was also just more of a being to being connection.
Yeah, I think it's a really nice project because, like, well, your parents are, they're older than you. Like, I'm going to assume 30 years older. For some people, it could be 40. For some people, it could be younger. But either way, like, you don't see them every day and they're older than you. So the amount of moments that you will spend with them in life is usually way less than you think, even more with grandparents. And if you take that chance to still, yeah, establish like some depth in the connection with it, like it's a really nice thing to do and to do while you have the chance. So yeah,
Yeah,
I get it.
for sure.
You hinted at men's work earlier, and that's something I want to hear a lot about, mostly because I know that you went very deep into it and also have worked into it and or helped organize the men's festival and everything. Um, I know very little about it except that I just feel like there's a need for it in society for something for men. Men are very damaged in general, and I love to hear, yeah, what it is, what you are doing with it, what things that you have experienced or learned.
Yeah, what it is. I guess it's a way for us as a collective and of course individuals to sort of start reestablishing a healthy masculinity in our world, because as you said, right now I think there's this whole narrative about for 3,000 or 5,000 years we had the patriarchy and this kind of toxic version of masculinity really sort of raping the earth in a way with our capitalism and buildings and I agree there's a sense of attunement that has been lost in the masculine. Um, and I personally think a big part of finding healthy masculinity again nowadays is finding healthy femininity in the masculine, which is why I've devoted so much of my time to these um, practices of embodiment and deep sensing. And yeah, through that, the masculine can find its proper place. And also, as I said, it's like we lost like 98% of the men nowadays are just numb to the head. So it's like this base of men need to feel again and help each other feel again. And and so there's that aspect, but there's another aspect is the part of this traditional masculinity that can be strengthened again, which is values like responsibility in the community. Like I need, like in general, responsibility as men has been something that's always been hard to take up on, but is even more needed nowadays with our crumbling society. And then just this thing to hold each other accountable as men is something that, or to call each other out on bullshit, is something that's barely happening anymore. And it's so needed if we were to stand strong like pillars for our communities. So that's another side. And there's all these facets of what a healed or healthy masculinity could look like that I think are really important for the new world or new earth that is being birthed right now.
And what does working on this look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I was very happy to find the men's work field, because for me it brought a lot of things together that I've been doing beforehand. I found like this umbrella to put all of my work in. Um, yeah, what it looks like, it could look like so much. It could like healing your father wound, for example, really looking at the relationship with your father and how it has impacted you to be able to stand in your masculinity. It could look like going on to men's circles and meeting with only men to sort of like um, build and strengthen this sense of masculinity, because there is an energy that is really only there when only men meet. So there's a difference.
Yeah.
We have all these workplaces nowadays where men and women are together, and it's really not that common anymore that men are together with just men. And there's something there that gets a space to sort of bubble up and start emerging, that we miss as men, that we need as men. And it has to do with this sense of, like I said, accountability, responsibility, being there for brothers. That is really, really important.
Yeah, and there is something like if you add one woman in the mix, the conversation changes, and that's not because of her, uh, but the men start to relate to each other differently somehow, right? Even I'm not even talking about like sexual competition or anything, but it changes like the way the interaction goes. Because if then you would call someone out on their shit, it almost seems like you are putting them down instead of supporting them. Um, then there's also the fact that if you would just do your man thing, then you're effectively excluding a person from the group that's there. Yeah, a lot of things change it. Like it, you would say it shouldn't have to, but I've yet to see a situation where it doesn't. Yeah, I must say I also don't have that much. It's in my life, like the evenings with only men. I do have private interactions with men, which nourish me similarly. Um, so
Yeah,
you
yeah.
organize that then for anybody to join or
Yeah, I'll just add, like, what I really like the most, and I found one of the more valuable things is, I was lacking a lot of warrior energy in my life. And I think, the further we seem to progress in society, the more this masculine warrior energy is really being sort of pushed down and repressed and not really allowed. And that's exactly what men need. Men need challenge. Men, and it's like bringing this, like being together with men and having this energy allowed to be there. We could step into our warriors together in the way of challenging each other's bullshit.
mm,
And this is a quality that, yeah, is so needed, because we're full of shit. We're all full of shit, and we need really, we need each other to call each other out and
yeah.
kind of see where we can't see.
So
And
I
yeah.
have too much of that warrior energy in me. So like one of my uh, a therapist that I had in the past said like I gave me as an assignment to go eat ice cream. You know, because I did because my warrior would reject it, and
Mm.
so I I challenge myself and I try to call out myself on my bullshit, but obviously you have so many blind spots, and when I think about that, it's like yeah, that's not like that. I don't even recognize the need for having other people do that with me because I'm already doing. Um, so it's like yeah, it would be way nicer if that was just a thing that someone else with a third perspective could do with me, like call me out on it. And sometimes I probably have that need because I'm good at convincing myself of things. And then yeah, like somebody like maybe um, like my girlfriend would call me out on it in absence of somebody to have to call me out on it, or it would happen at work or something, you know, but not in that context. So now that you say that, I do have a need for that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and not to forget, a lot of men our age and the older we get, or just have very little friends. And this, like,
Hmm.
this space where you have a deep connection is, we don't have a lot of spaces in our society where it's safe to do emotional work, where it's safe to deeply connect, be really seen. And I think men's circles are great places for that as well.
Huh. Yeah, no, that you, I mean, it also requires other people to kind of stand more in their warrior energy, right? So, because now I have a lot of male friends, um, and the main sense that I have with them is that we're just there for each other, like to help or like for emotional support or what, but there's not that sense of like friction, you know, like healthy
Mm,
friction, which I imagine with like calling out each other, like putting someone in a tense spot, but still having the safe space to let the person get the positive message from that. And part of that, I think, is that that space also doesn't really get announced. Like we see each other organically in environments with a lot of people, or we go meet one on one, and then yeah, at most it's more of the nourishing kind where you listen to the other person and you just but the challenging doesn't really happen, and I never identified that need either. I like that you're sharing this.
Yeah, that's beautiful what you share. Just to share, like I've been really diving so deep um in my spiritual path, in the sense of also doing a lot of deep silent retreats, like 7 days silence, 10 days silence, that I'm at this point where I have to where I'm sort of relearning what it's like to make friends, to make deep friends, good friends, and what does it mean to be a good friend, an authentic friend, an adult friend. So I'm in a space where I'm really exploring that, like what are mutually nourishing, beneficial adult friendship relationships. Uh,
Mm.
yeah.
So, what is your, if you have it, like your process for figuring that out?
I, I'm in this online community called Possibility Management. It's a whole
Mm-hmm.
story. It's really this fascinating online community based around personal development in an online and an offline sense, and a very kind of gamey, playful way as well. And they sort of challenged me to just interview people that I found, um, yeah, sort of had this skill or had
Mm.
good adult friends or could possibly tell me more. So I've been interviewing a few people on my YouTube channel about adult friendship and adult relating, and just learning by interviewing people like you are doing now.
Yeah, yeah. Part of that is the same. I have dived, whatever the past
So
tense of to. I have dove deep into connecting with other people. I also recognize that I have a lot to learn. So like I simultaneously want to share what I know, but the main reason I want to talk to a lot of other people is that there's so much I don't. And so having this conversation with you, this way I can share any of that with other people as well, learn from it myself, like take pieces of all of it. And the reason I asked this question in particular was an approach that I have been doing sometimes for my friendships is to just ask, like, well, in which ways could I support you more? And sometimes I have a hunch, like one thing is I never text people. I just don't do it unless I want to meet up with them. So if I am busy for a month, they won't hear me until after. And nobody has ever told me I want you to text me more, but I do think like, well, wouldn't they? So whenever I think of someone, I'm now texting them, at least that I'm thinking of them. I know I don't text much, but
mm,
later. But I've noticed that when you ask other people how you can be a better friend, or either they don't necessarily like to give you such feedback, or they don't know exactly what they need because they are focused on what is good about what there already
yeah.
is. Like it's not always easy to identify what the possibilities are before they exist. And yeah, I'd love to get better at that.
Mhm.
So this possibility management, was that the name?
Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of, so is it basically a group that supports each other to figure out that, like, okay, you want to grow in this, you don't know what, you don't know yet, so let's explore it, let's find a way to explore it.
Yeah, I'd like it if we could bring up I bring up the definition. I have it here. So what they say possibility management is a copyleft and open code thoughtware that springs from the context of radical responsibility and expands the way of thinking and living. So
Mm.
I'm still diving into this, even though I did 2 trainings with them in Portugal this summer. It's such a wide and vast field of possibilities and of a way of living and community that so much. I guess it's based around this concept of how can we take more radical responsibility for our lives.
Yeah.
And
So.
they offer this whole online and offline world with things like rage clubs where you get to explore your anger, or fear clubs where you get to explore how fear is playing out in your life and how much fear is ruling your life or not. So all these emotional healing spaces where you can go into healing sessions with people. And I've done like 10 sessions now, and it's fascinating because it includes the sort of 4 bodies, the mental, emotional, spiritual, and it's a really holistic way of healing they provide. And on
Yeah.
top of that, there's this Telegram group they call the Village, where people can just chat. And so it's this whole fascinating online world of conscious and radically responsibly living.
Yeah, it's a real subculture.
Yeah.
Well, I'll link to all these things in the YouTube description as well. I like how, like, when I hear this, I can see how that fits under your umbrella of men's work and why you explore it, like with responsibility and everything. And at the same time, when I hear it, I think, well, it also fits under my umbrella of connecting. Like, there's all these crossover.
Yeah, they
I
also have intimacy labs, by the way, where you get to explore what is intimacy, what is adult
Cool.
relating.
I recently, well, recently, it's like half a year ago, went to a rage room. It's something that it's not with a therapist or anything. So,
No,
but
no.
it's also from a friend of a friend, and they just have these rooms, and then they have anything that you can imagine. So, going from just kitchenware to TVs, just furniture, and then you get like baseball bats, bowling balls, whatever you want, and you just get to destroy everything for an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they say like people come in thinking it's for fun, and they say like, yeah, I'm not gonna rage. I have no things like that. Like I'm just zen, and then within 5 minutes they're like really processing a lot, and it's cool because it's in the it's just fun, right? It's just a fun afternoon, but afterwards you did get a lot of positive benefits out of that that you may not even have realized happened. I
Mm,
definitely think there's a need for things like that in society, um, or even like just a place where you can go and there's a person, real or not, and you can just say anything that you think is inappropriate to say, but you do want to say, because I think that's like what's happening a lot. People just keeping in like everything to fit the mold of what is acceptable,
yeah, and
while the truth is that everyone has all kinds of thoughts that are, yeah.
man, that's one of my personal frustrations when I meet people that are not so much into personal spiritual development, because for me it's so normal to express all of me. Even if it's too hard, I would probably go into a sort of a meta level and say, oh, I feel fear because I want to say
Mm,
this, and then the way to express it anyway. But
yeah.
that's so like when I kind of sense that other people are holding back, what I know must be going on. Like there must be festering with rage or something, and they just act
Mm.
like, "Oh, I'm good." It's just yeah, it's
Only
challenging
good
for me.
vibes.
Yeah.
But I resonate with that. I want to repeat it what you said, or paraphrase it, because I think it's a great tip for anybody in any situation where you're afraid to say something. Like I do that myself. Like either I would say, okay, I want to say something and I feel this about it, or you could even just say like, oh, I feel nervous about this, or I judge myself as this being something stupid, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Like whenever you have this thought that blocks you from saying it, first share that thought, and then still, yeah,
Yeah.
it's like a segue into saying it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll share how it's done in possibility management, because
All
they're
right.
really, that one part of it is the feelings work, and they really pin all of the emotional and feeling stuff back to 4 essentials, which is
Mm-hmm.
you could either be feeling fear, joy, anger, or fear, joy, anger, or sadness. And like how they would approach this situation is just, I feel because, and then you just share like I feel fear because, and it's a, they have all these maps that sort of help you make it easier to get in touch with your essence, your feeling essence. So it's
Yeah.
I feel fear because, and then I feel sadness because, and then if you sort of keep answering that question, you eventually probably get to the actual feeling as well.
Yeah. I'm gonna add one to it. I'm not using it, but I reflected and realized I should. Um, I was recently like talking about insecurities that I had with someone, and so like when doing so, I noticed that I was projecting a lot onto them, like, oh, you said this in that way and that meant that for me, or and then sure, I was able to express everything, but afterwards I said, like, to myself, I should correct this and say the story that I am, like, I feel this because the story that I'm making up is that, whether it's true or not, like, because even if they know that it's just me in my head, I think it's important to acknowledge that, because otherwise I would risk like making the impression that I'm actually blaming them for my feelings, which is not true. Um, yeah, so it's good, I think, to have these little fill in the blank phrases that help you
Yeah, a
communicate
big,
whatever is going on.
yeah, that's something that I learned from circling as well. Is this a big part of it is being like making distinctions about things and like really, yeah, when you're making assumptions, naming it. I have a story that, and then just checking that assumption whether it's true or not. So you get to actually know without having a possibility to hurt someone or trigger someone.
Yeah. And so what I said now in this conversation was, I think this is that true, but I felt like that still the energy behind it was quite direct, like, I think this of you, instead of it's my
Mm,
story, like, that I made, you just happen to be a character in it, and the
yeah,
character I also made, it's
yeah.
like, yeah, even though you
Mm,
exist as a person.
that's a
Yeah.
smart way. Yeah.
Yeah. I know that you've followed a lot of trainings. You sent me a list which I think was incomplete, still very long. I'd love to ask about all of them, but I picked two things that I'd love to hear about. Mostly for selfish reasons, because I may want to take them myself. So the first thing is the leadership training that you followed most recently, which was 6 months, I believe.
Yeah.
What that was about, what you learned, how that impacted your life.
Yeah, it's been really challenging for me actually. So this is a part of Circling Europe. It's called the SAS training, which is their flagship training. Um,
Yeah, yeah, it was on my list even already, so now I get to get a review.
yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, why I chose to do it is because it allows us in that 6 month period to really integrate a surrendered way of living life. And not only that, also you can start offering workshops and circles when people can get to experience that in relationship with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the 6 month journey has been, yeah, because there's so much surrender, and especially the way the leadership holds it, it's like whatever you kind of have to look at or is challenging for you in your life will come up.
Mm-hmm.
So
That is great.
really, if I'm honest, I think it's a year ago now that it started. I'm just a month ago when I started going back into these deep meditation retreats to sort of integrate my last years. That's really what I've been doing the last weeks and months. And I realized what I had to learn, which is like, oh, when I'm being in a space with others, I'm not really being with them and their world. I'm really in my world. And so when it comes again to like adult relationships, is something that I'm learning now. Is like, can I have a little bit more of my energy invested in them and the other and their world, and not just my world? So they have these principles like being with the other in the world.
Yeah.
It's like 5 principles. The other one is um, speaking from the level of sensation. So you're really speaking from your essence, basically, from what you're feeling in that moment, which is such an essential, beautiful thing, I find. Then it's like owning your experience. Like you could be you could be angry, but not really be embodying that anger. So when you
Yeah.
own your experience, which is what you're invited to really start living all of these principles in the circles and then in your life. So then it's like owning my anger. So really get fucking angry when I'm actually angry, you know? And there's another one has to do with um, sort of like trusting the experience. That's the one. So trusting that whatever is happening right now is exactly supposed to happen the way it is. So you're not
Mm-hmm.
sort of going into insecurities and just really letting the process or the moment unfold how it wants to naturally unfold.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
guess I've said 3 principles now.
I think you said all five, but in
I
random order.
Great.
But yeah, I mean, I've done circling before, and I've experimented with the principles. And one thing that I noticed, and I assume it's even more crazy with the 6 months, is that they change what the principles mean to you changes over time. And I particularly have this with the being with the other in their world. I think by default I'm not the most empathic person,
Hmm.
and so the
I wouldn't say
first
so.
I don't know. I mean, how in my internal experience,
Yeah.
I tend to be very rooted in my own experience, and one way that I would think that I became empathic for years was just always when somebody shares something, I think, well, how would I feel if I was in their situation, and I would think that was empathy, but it's actually not. It's just like making their story about myself and then throwing it back to them. But we're like it doesn't. So my next step would be like, well, how would I feel if I was in their situation and I was them? And so it made me understand them better. But again, like the understanding comes from asking myself something, not from being with them. And I've had moments while practicing this where I think I experienced real empathy, which was just like I listened and I felt it, and there was no reflection on myself.
Hmm.
But I don't know how to induce those moments. So, like by default, I still reason my way into something that resembles empathy. But the moments that I found real empathy, it made me feel so much closer to that person. And I mean, who knows? Maybe there are levels beyond that, right? And I will discover that that's also not what empathy is. But I had that with all the principles. If you did this for 6 months intensely, did you go way deeper in that? Like, were there any big revelations of, oh, this is not what I thought it was?
Yeah, a lot of it for me was confusing at the time because my thought maps were continuously being challenged. And that's what happens when your thoughtware is being upgraded. You just get confused because your way of seeing reality is being upgraded and
Mm-hmm.
takes a while. So, but the last weekend, because I think there's about 3 or 4 weekends you get to join each other, and then there's work in between. Um, But the last weekend was really profound in the way that um, I started really owning my experience, and I had a sort of cathartic experience. I went fully into anger that wanted to come through me, and I started embodying this full-on warrior, like fucking serious. Like I was ready to kill somebody. That's the amount of anger that came through me. And all of a sudden, the whole room was with me and really experiencing this embodied warrior. And yeah, in a way, it felt cathartic for me because, as I shared before, for me, this embodying my warrior archetype has been very challenging. So, this taking a stand for myself, embodying my no, embodying my strong yes, and like this got really empowered and more welcomed in my system in that space of emergence where that
Yeah.
was apparently what wanted to unfold and emerge for my system, for my being.
This was in a
And but there
physical
was
room?
really a part that that
Yeah.
stood up for waking people the fuck up, and that was what my warrior that came up and was like, I need you fucking guys to stand up and wake all the fucking others up with me. Like I can't do this alone, and that really strongly came up. And yeah.
Hmm. So, you
So
know,
I really like also these surrendered leadership spaces because they offer a way of emergence that is there's no set framework in a way other than a few principles that allows for
yeah.
life to bring forth what is needed for every person's evolution. So in that sense, that was for me the perfect thing to happen, and I really like that because it's so natural and organic.
So there was a lot of freedom in that.
Yeah.
And is that it? Is that in a physical space or is it online with a group?
Yeah, so like yeah, there's 3 or 4 weekends that you meet in a physical space,
Mm-hmm.
and then in between there's online practices that you do
Yeah.
together, either with your buddy or with yeah, actually with a few buddies. You get to practice one-on-one circling, and then there's a few online group Zooms, and then there's real life weekends where you meet in the
Yeah.
flesh.
Yeah. It sounds like a beautiful experience. I've been working a lot on anger with bioenergetics practice, and I find it very easy to let that out or embody it by myself by now. But for example, there are like I find it all right to verbally express my anger to other people, but to express it with the same embodied intensity as I would do when I'm alone, yeah, it's like one of the things where I do think like, oh no, like what if that will scare them? What if they will think I'm overreacting and not appreciate that? Like I am holding my physical expression of that back. Probably, maybe I also think it would scare me if I do that in the presence of other people. Like, well, even like even when it's
Yeah,
not directed at
can I
them. Yeah,
interject you a little bit here?
yeah,
Because I feel something strongly, and I think the next front line of evolution for the collective now is no longer this rage work or sacred rage that you
mm-hmm.
see nowadays coming up a lot, but it's really the work we have to do around fear. And I think fear is the next like final frontier that we have to do, because I hear you say, yeah, I would feel a lot of
Yes.
scaredness about bringing my anger, and it's like yeah, and it's also fucking weird if you're gonna embody your anger and you start fucking having these knickety knees and
Well,
stuff. But this is the
yes,
next level.
you have a good point. Like, if that's what I think, then it's not anger I should be working on.
Yeah, it's and we have all these
Yeah,
mixes, and
yeah,
also yeah, in possibility management you get to unmix emotions because
yeah, yeah, yeah.
we're always feeling four emotions to a certain degree, and it can be that you're feeling 80% or let's say 60% anger but 80% fear. So you're
Yeah.
best off feeling the fear that you have about the anger. So first you feel the fear so the anger can emerge, and then
Love
you
it.
know.
I'm gonna dive into that for the rest of the week. Thank you.
Welcome.
Uh, well, the other one I wanted to ask about was the you. I don't know. you received a couple months of guidance from a Tantra teacher and went quite deep in that. Is that alone or with the partner?
Yeah, it was mainly alone, although there was one other person in that group container with me. Yeah, I came to a point where I've explored so much in the last 5 years of possible paths, and yeah, I also was together with Hare Krishna woman, and it's a very devoted path to God. I might share more of that later. And then there's Buddhism and like Christianity, and I was really like after all these years of searching, like thought it might be a good idea to ground myself in one tradition, because I've been experiencing a lot of confusion also, like doing all these different trainings and then really needing a place to be able to ground it all together in and say, okay, this is the path I walk, the main path.
Hmm. And
And
just to
I looked at,
clarify, because now I hear you talking, this was not this was Tantra as the sexual energy practice or Tantra as the Eastern religion?
yeah, so what I learned also with my teacher, and I'll finish my thought first. And
Yeah.
is so I decided on Tantra, because traditional Tantra,
Yeah, the
because
Indian.
that's the path that really incorporates sort of everything that I've been doing. It's about
Hmm.
consciousness exploration and unfoldment, and really the embodiment of all of that. So really being deeply connected also with your sensations.
Yeah.
So the traditional tantric path really has very little to do with sexuality, and
Yes.
we often forget that in the West, because in the West we're so about this sensational stuff that we make it very easily about the sexuality and the sexual practices, which is in reality really only a small part of Tantra. And I would suggest, if you ever want to get into Tantra, that you find an authentic teacher, which is
Yeah.
hard to find, but is really worth it.
Yeah, I remember. Um, so at one point there was a year where I was also exploring what religion means to me after being an atheist for most of my life. So what I did was, for 1 month every year, I would pick a religion and read and do say all the prayers, like feel into them, read all the books, and follow all the rules or the daily routines, as if I really did believe that religion, and I would try to convince myself I believe it and I was fully devoted. And then the next month I do the next one, and then just see like, well, what do they do to me? And there's like downsides and upsides to all of them. And I remember there one of the last ones I did was based on traditional tantra, and two things that I remember most is that the worldview that they had aligned most with my worldview that I had accumulated passing through all those other religions and atheism and all of that. And I I couldn't find proper information on it. I read one great book about it, Tantra Illuminated, but yeah, okay, it was great about understanding the worldview, but without guidance, I couldn't do it. So I didn't manage to do this, to do like a month and of living as if I was tantric. So I would be interested in learning more about it.
I highly recommend it, and indeed, you need a teacher that knows it, the way and the field. And the one I found has, he went to India, he visited all the masters. So his name is Peter Littlejohn Cook, and
Hmm.
yeah, I have a great experience with him, really exploring this path.
Nice. And how did that? Um, well, let me first ask you. So you were in a relationship with this woman devoted to the Hare Krishna beliefs. Was that before or after or during this period?
Yeah, so not last year, but the year before that, I went to the Mana Festival. I was still in the core team back then. Um, and the place I was living at wasn't really working out. So I really needed something new, and just some changes in my life. I didn't, yeah. I was a little bit sad because it wasn't working out, and I was like, I need to just go on a meditation retreat somewhere. And people started talking to me about the Radhadesh temple, which is the Hare Krishna or ISKCON temple in the Ardennes in Belgium, and said that maybe I could go there. And I had I had the opportunity to rent this camper van, so I went with the camper van to the Mana Festival, and after the Mana Festival, I went to this temple and just they give free food, and
Mm-hmm.
we've been there together, right?
Yeah, we've been there together once, indeed, in another
Yeah, so I
lifetime.
was, yeah. So yeah, I was just really enjoying the daily food there, and then I would just there's a mountain close by. I would just go up the mountain and just sit there for hours and just sink into the earth. I was just laying on the earth and just meditating and just completely surrendering. And at one point, I came off the mountain and I walked past this like vegetable garden, ecological vegetable garden of the Hare Krishnas. And there was a woman sitting there playing a setar, just like in the Bhagavad Gita books. You have, you know, Krishna, and then there's all the women around him who were, you know. Anyways, she was sitting there playing music, and I was in a way fascinated about these women, but also I figured it'd be a good time to check out the garden and see if they're, you know, what it's like. This, how do they do it? Hare Krishnas, this permaculture thing. And I was walking around, and eventually we started talking, and um, from then a whole journey actually of about a year and a half, 2 years of deep relating with this woman unfolded, who was a priestess of the Hare Krishna tradition, who had been living in that temple for 12 years. So was really deeply immersed in this tradition of what it actually is bhakti yoga, which is one of the yogic paths that is not so much focused on the postures, but really more focused on devotion to God and like bringing offerings and flowers to all the deities. And yeah, I really learned a lot from this woman because she was also 16 years older than me, and I learned a lot about what is God, like in that tradition, and what is the divine. And you know, she was very gifted in healing also, so we did a lot of healing work together, and she was so able to feel the subtle energies and interpret them. And I was highly sensitive, because but I could never really make sense of the sensations that I felt. So it was really a great period of a shared growth and understanding for me.
And at this point, were you already into the Tantra training as well, or
No, that
yeah?
that actually that happened when we sort of broke up for real, because it was kind of tentative. I honestly I had a very hard time committing to the relationship because I didn't see it really working out in the long term.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually we decided to just part ways for a while and give each other space. And and then I decided, okay, but I found so much gold in this deep spiritual tradition. So what this woman offered me, this connection to this devotion to this divinity, I need to find somewhere still.
Yeah.
So I chose the tantric path, and that caused a whole special unfoldment to where I am eventually now. Like I believe quite strongly that this current tiny house and beautiful piece of land I'm on was sort of manifested due to the surrender I found in the tantric path.
And this is your own space that you have now.
Yeah, well, this is a tiny house I'm renting from
Nice.
the daughter of the landowner, and yeah, it's in a way it's my own space, but I'm renting it.
So surrender came up a few times in. So there's both the surrender leadership, and then yeah, in the relationship to life that comes from the tantric worldview. And also remember that one of the last things that we did together was experiment with trying to find like what is it to surrender. And and yeah, the biggest challenge for me was trusting that, like, because if I completely surrendered to whatever life offered to me, I would also reach dead ends, I would go through unpleasant experiences and whatever was necessary. I think it was all necessary, and as it will continue to be. But I'm interested in, so my view of leadership, uh, part of that is also decisiveness, and giving direction. How do you, in your current understanding, like put surrendering and taking in your position as a leader in your own life? How do you put that together?
I think that's a brilliant question, and I think it's an essential one to ask when you start exploring this path of surrender. There's a way. I think we even had a discussion about this a while ago together, and I really liked the answer you were giving, and I'd love to hear actually your answer on it, because I still find myself really searching when it comes to these things, and that's why I'm walking so much this path of IFS, internal
Mm-hmm.
family systems, because it's their website is called selfleadership.com or something, so it's really about developing self-leadership from a place of interconnectedness with all the parts. um, and I think that's answering then now for myself quickly. I think eventually when all the parts have their righteous place, and you could see it either in a child victim, or you could see it in the masculine archetypes, like when
Mm-hmm.
your king has the vision, when your magician has done the trauma work, so all your parts are healed and unburdened, when your warrior knows what to do, where to cut through, where to give a yes, where to give a no, because the vision and the direction is clear, and 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 your lover knows exactly what to flow into and what not, and what to love and what to nourish. Then there's yeah, when I hear myself speak, so then there's a clarity that can offer this decisiveness. But hearing myself speak now, it really comes down to the king archetypes, like how clear is your direction and your vision, and based on that, you can then sort of like, I guess, sense your way in. But I'd love to hear how you look at this.
Well, to be honest, I don't remember what I originally replied to you, and there's a
Yeah,
part of me that thinks like, oh, if Wout thought that was a good answer, then I would like to repeat it and sound smart. Uh, so I'm not gonna do that.
yeah. I think I could answer because I remember a
Yeah.
little bit of it.
Well,
You
I'm curious.
actually, yeah,
I think the best thing I can do is answer first, so
yeah.
that I'm not influenced by what I said at the time.
Sure,
And
go
afterwards,
ahead,
you can repeat it. Maybe I can learn from what I said at that moment.
go ahead.
um, yeah, how I think about it now, if because I thought that I had no idea, and I was asking you for advice, but now I ask myself this question. I'm like, oh, well, I should trust more that I know the answers as well, or at least the answer that's fit for me right now. Um, I think for me, the ideal of surrendering is like life unfolds in a certain way which you have less control over than you would like to believe. So things come in your way, experiences, obstacles, ideas, everything kind of gets thrown at you. The decisiveness part is kind of like, okay, you need to, as a leader, clearly decide, what am I going to do with this? Not necessarily like, what am I going to make of what is given to me, of the experience that is given to me. But at the same time, there's, and this goes back to surrendering, is like, can I also accept that it could be that life is asking of me to make a specific decision or take a specific stance, and that's the one that I have to take right now, even when my little ego person would love to make it into something else, to get, I don't know, to more approval from others, or what. So I don't know, like you would say, on one hand, things come your way. You have to trust. I wouldn't say trust that they're the right things. You just have to accept them. This is what it is anyway. It doesn't matter what I think about it. It's coming here, so I better give myself to this experience. And it is up to me to not meet that experience with a confused stance, but with a decisive one. This is what I want to make of it. And while making a decision what I'm gonna make of it, I would also ask, well, what is God asking me to make of it? And there's not always an answer, you know, and sometimes, and ideally, that would be perfectly aligned with my ego as well, I guess. And I'm using the term God here as could be as life itself, basically. The deeper, yeah, truths,
Yeah.
not as a
Yeah.
bearded man in the sky. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't
I
know if
think
that
you.
was very clear because I was exploring the answer as I was speaking.
Yeah, I did the same. Interesting because I did the same too. Actually, it's such a actually a deep question.
By the way, like
Because
this is
it
my answer,
touches.
but I don't always apply this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's. I feel it's a deep, almost existential question. Like, how
yeah,
do you look at life and operate in life? And um, yeah, like what you said, you could say like, what's in service of love, what's in service
yeah.
of truth, and then just see, or and then let yourself be guided by that.
And the tough part is like what's in service of love, even if I don't like it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then really this stuff of the internal family systems or like
yeah,
they really can come in handy where you get to be able to see like this is a part of me and then just see what it needs for you to be able to work with it so it can step aside so you can step into more higher alignment.
yeah. Well, I'm curious what I said originally and if it resembles that at all.
I think in a way you said that there's a threshold, sort of like you have in this book Getting Things Done, you have this thing where they say if you can finish it in 2 minutes, do it in 2 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and otherwise plan it in for later. I guess you kind of applied this to this way of surrendered living and put a threshold on it and said, yeah, um, surrendering for these things or in this container or limitations is okay, but if it goes to these things, then I have to decide quicker or I have to decide in a moment. I'm not so
Ah,
clear anymore, actually.
huh, interesting. It basically is. I when I hear you now, I think I don't. I'm not trying to remember what I said, but thinking it now, it could have to do with also decision making skills, right? Like some things are better handled fast, and then it's more like, okay, I do what intuitively comes to me. If it didn't go well, I'll deal with it later, but at least I took action. And with other
Yeah, and
things, it's like take your time to feel into it and do it right. Like don't rush. It has both to do with impact and urgency, I guess.
yeah, and in general, I think it's better to speaking more from a mental map than an experiential one now because of all the books
Yeah.
I read. But what I say often is better to make quick decisions and change them slowly than the other way around. They make slow
Hmm.
decisions and make them quickly and change them quickly. So
Yeah.
yeah,
One thing now, how I apply this is like if I tackle bigger projects, I never make quick decisions or even take quick action. It's like I'd rather see the plan unfold somewhat, and the plan is not necessarily like supposed to be the plan that we follow, but it's just supposed to have a plan so that I kind of know where
mm-hmm.
to go. But yeah, if someone's throwing a rock at me, I'd rather duck than think, how fast is this rock coming at me? Should I move left or right? What's the best action here? Like,
Yeah,
right, yeah. Okay. I feel kind of like I'm nearing the end of conversational um, capacity in this
Yeah,
moment.
likewise.
If there's anything that you would love to share or talk about or ask, then here's like all the space you want.
Yeah, no, I think I'm very happy with this podcast. I think we touched on a lot of beautiful topics, and yeah,
Yeah.
feels good for now. And I see also potential for lots of other.
Yeah, I'd love to catch up with you deeper as people another time, and also I'd
Mhm.
love to just um, more. I don't know if it's like an interview or something like this, but about the topic of embodiment specifically, because I'm very interested in it. Also busy with it, but I think in a different way than you. So I'd love to hear all the things that you have been doing on that topic and learn from that and share it as well.
Sounds great.
All right. Thanks a lot for the time and energy. I look
Thank you,
forward
Pep.
to speaking with you again as well.
Likewise.